Stocks, bonds, ETFs, straight out of downtown Chicago. This is Zach's Market Edge.
Welcome to Zach's Market Edge, the podcast about investing in your life. I'm Tracy Reinick, and this week I'm joined by Zach's chief equity strategist and the editor of the International Trader Service, John Blank, who's actually here in the studio with us. He's usually on the West Coast, but we have him here today, so that's a treat for us. But it's fitting that we're having John on this week because we're going to talk about investing in the part of the world that I know for me is near and dear to my heart. I think it is for you too, John.
True.
At least part of it is. We're going to talk about Mexico and Colombia because they're kind of being overlooked, I think, by a lot of investors right now. But there's a lot going on down there in that part of the world. And there are ways to invest and get in there. So we're going to talk about a couple of different ways and ways people can go about it. And we're going to let's start off with Mexico first. And we're going to start off with some of the Mexican stocks because it's a little more developed than Colombia in terms of their big corporations trading on our exchanges and things like that. So we're going to cover some of those. If you want to play Mexico this way, you can go out there and buy some of the individual companies. So the biggest one, and the one I think most people know of, is the American Mobile. Did I say that right? Mobile?
American Mobile.
Is that how they pronounce it? Its ticker is AMX. And that is Carlos Slim's company. He's the billionaire who's down there. And that is, huge in telecom. I was looking up some of their stats, 68% of the wireless market share, and it's like 70% of the landlines down there. But a couple years ago, the government did pass some legislation to try to kind of break up his monopoly on what was going on down there, because it's not the greatest thing to only have one telecom company controlling everything. So they attempted that, but as you can see, it's still pretty extensive what they have down there. They're number 5 right now when we're recording this on July 5th. But, estimates have been being cut. That doesn't look that good to me. But, they are basically the biggest company down there.
Yeah, I think the estimates are cut for this competition reason. I think they're cutting prices, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, they actually have to compete with other people now.
Yeah. A little aside there, I go to Laredo, Mexico, which is the old historic capital of California, and he likes it. And he parks his yacht in Laredo.
Okay.
And he lives on his yacht outside. I've seen his yacht. It's like a Bill Gates-esque thing.
Yeah, I don't think he's hurting at all.
No, he's the richest guy down there, right?
Yeah, basically, and one of the richest in the world. So the PE for AMX is about 15 times. So it's not real pricey. You do get a dividend paying 2.5%, but it's not super exciting to invest in that one. Switching gears a little bit is another interesting company. I'm not going to pronounce its real name, but everybody just calls it FEMSA. That ticker is FMX. I actually own this one, and I've owned it for a couple of years, but it's been going nowhere the last couple of years. It's expensive. It's trading at 27 times. But the reason I bought it, they own Coca-Cola FEMSA, which is one of the biggest bottlers in all of Latin America. You can also buy Coca-Cola FEMSA separately, but I kind of like the bigger company, so I went with that. And then they own OXXO, the big convenience stores. I'm sure you've been to them, John, whenever you're down there. I know I go to them. I think everybody goes to them. It's basically the 7-Eleven of Mexico.
Right.
And that's a big moneymaker for them because as the middle class, expands, they're buying the sodas and the chips and the whatever else is in there. And so that's been good for them. And then they've been trying to expand into another area that I find intriguing, which is basically pharmacies. I don't know if you noticed, there's no Walgreens or CVS's when you go down there. There's all these kind of somewhat look like mom and pops. There are these little pharmacias down there that sell basically all this crazy stuff that you would get at a Walgreens or CVS. But they bought up a chain of those in the Yucatan. I know there was like 100 or 150 of those. So they're trying to create basically an OXXO of these pharmacies down there too, which could be a real growth opportunity for them. But I don't know how that's going.
Yeah, the thing I get out of Mexico from an economist perspective on these things we're talking about is Mexico has finally gotten this idea. It's not the state of the market, right? I mean, before it was either nationalized or not nationalized. And
Right.
now they understood that they went to monopolies. Coca-Cola monopoly, the American Mobile monopoly, Pemex, Cemex.
Yeah,
They didn't actually put the market to work, right?
that's
So
right.
they're in a second phase here, which is why they're growing and why they're interesting from a productivity perspective is they are finally getting, and it's a big idea. The thing people need to understand from in Latin America, getting the idea of market competition and breaking companies up and letting more companies in is huge. Now, to give you an idea where this goes, there was a guy named Raul Prebisch. You ever heard of this guy?
No.
Raul Prebisch was he was head of the UNDP, University Development and he went around Latin America in the 70s selling this idea of autarky, like closing off markets, private, but keeping them high tariffs, and you couldn't compete. So what Mexico's doing now is they're the first Latin American country to actually begin this process of truly having 3 and 4 firms in a given big market. And we got this airport operator. We could talk.
Yeah,
about,
we could
right?
talk about them too. They split those up.
There
It
you
used
go.
to be the one, like
There
you
you
were just
go.
saying. And now that I think about it, yeah, there's like 6 or 7 of
This is
them
my
now or
example.
something. Yeah, and they control various. I don't know how they decided, but they gave each one like a certain key airport so that they could survive the popular airports, and then let them
Hub
go
and
off.
spoke, Mexican style.
Yeah, they let them go off and do their own thing.
Competition, real competition.
That's right. And a couple of them you can invest in. And I always thought this was an interesting way to get into Mexico. One of them, if you've been to Cancun, you've seen the sign when you leave the airport. It lists their name out and it just says ASUR there, ASUR. The ticker is actually ASR on the U.S. exchanges. They run the Cancun airport. They run Cozumel, Merida, a few others in that area. And obviously the traffic has just been crushing it in Cancun. It's just super popular. But the interesting thing to me is that they just reported some May numbers because they give monthly traffic numbers. And I thought this was interesting. So, of course, the international side is doing well because everybody flies into there to go to the Riviera Maya and obviously Cancun. But domestically, their traffic was up 9.7% into that Cancun airport, and it jumped up to 566,000 from 516,000 a year ago. So an extra 50,000 domestic internal people decided to go to Cancun and vacation. Like that's a big indicator to me, again, about this growing middle class. Like, we're starting to see internally the Mexican population spending the money, and it's not all just coming from external at these airport operators.
Yeah, the other thing I'd bring to the table here, Tracy, that I've just been reading about that's fascinating. One of the problems in Mexico, we know with the drug problem, but the issue that's related to it is that the legal system is so incredibly bad.
Right.
And they've made reforms here in the last few months to actually bring in a legitimate rule of law to Mexico for the first time in 500 years.
Yeah.
And this, again, is the thing that's neat about Mexico right now is they're tinkering with the system itself. They're not going after these big adjectives and big, broad concepts, ideologically speaking. They're talking about the specifics of these areas. So like we talked about with the airplanes and the airports and phones, they're getting into the details now. And that's the exciting thing.
Right. And it's really opened up that industry. I saw another interesting stat. One of the other airport operators is the Pacifico one that they own the Los Cabos. The load factor was a record level in May, but that's not exclusively, but a lot of that is international travelers going in there. That ticker is PAC, but they run Guadalajara too, which is the second largest city in Mexico. And they said domestic traffic into Guadalajara was up 19.4% in May. That's like huge numbers. That means, again, more people, they have some extra spending money. They're not getting on the train or the bus. The buses are good there and fairly cheap and affordable.
They are.
They're getting on the plane instead.
Yeah.
So that tells me a lot of good things are going on in the Mexican economy.
Absolutely. And I just want people to understand that for this idea that it's the idea of Mexico going to privatizing was a first step that wasn't in many ways a failed step. This one is much more exciting because it really, they're not going back, but this is where the gains are, right? This is where you run things well. And in the United States, we kind of gone the wrong way, particularly in our banking system. We've gone away from competition. We've agglomerated things. We run it, poor regulation. Our rule of law isn't getting worse. And Mexico is exciting because it's not drinking that Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
It's saying, look, you let's not get ideological about this anymore. Let's get specific about the specifics of these various areas. We can understand them and prove them. You know, I when I was down in San Miguel de Allende back in November, I had Thanksgiving dinner, and there was an old Mexican paper on the table there, and there was probably a 7 or 8 page insert of 8 or 9 sector ministers, the industrial sector, the hydro sector, the ag sector, talking about the country. And I was fascinated with the level of detail these people had, and their real. You wouldn't see a U.S. minister talking in these terms.
Yeah.
You know,
the bigger picture.
yeah, but also
of
like
thing.
here's I'm at the plant. Hydro
Oh, yeah.
means this much, and I'm out
Yeah.
putting this dam in place, and there's another one here, and these are where the new gridless things are going to be, and here's the next power stations, and you got a real sense that this country gets it. They're not only they're not in this ideological let's privatize or not. They're thinking about, hey, how do we get this to work?
Yeah, now maybe we're seeing that a little bit in the response from American companies going in there to do business, because other than these that I just mentioned, there's not a lot of other ways to play it on with our company, with Mexican companies. But I've noticed even in just the last year, there's been a lot of announcements of various companies going in to do business down there. So a couple of the ones, if you're interested in investing in Mexico, but you're kind of leery of the Mexican companies, another way I think you can play it is to go into U.S. companies looking down there for opportunities, and the door seems wide open. So like Home Depot, for example, they have 106 stores now in Mexico, which was much more. I kind of did I put it in Google, like how many, Home Depots in Mexico. And it gave me like around Mexico City on this map, and it looked like 10 or 11 or something. I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty good. And then I Googled some more and found out it's over 100 now. And they've only been there since 2001.
This is what I'm talking about. This is the idea that's new. That is, you actually let Home Depot in.
Right.
You don't talk to the NAFTA people. You say, for our own good.
Right.
Let's bring in Home
right.
Depot.
We have a middle class that wants to buy things from this company too.
Or work for them and learn how to do things better.
Yeah, they have 11,000 employees now in Mexico. That's enormous. Another one that
how many Home Depot managers are going to run their own companies in Mexico after this?
Right. It's a lot of training.
Training.
Yeah,
Vicente Fox was a Pepsi Coke executive.
Was he really?
Yes, he was.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, no, you're definitely going to see, the younger generation, the millennials, so to speak, able to move up the ranks of these, big conglomerate companies that are coming in there. Another one I just heard about was Old Navy. They're opening or have already opened 7 stores in Mexico City. They have some other ones around the country too, but that's a big also push to kind of get in there. And then I saw also late last year, Williams and Sonoma announced that they were partnering with the big department store chain Liverpool that's down there. So they're franchising them out, but they're opening up 13 stores, also all in Mexico City. That's across all their brands. So West Elm and Pottery Barn and Williams and Sonoma all going in there, which again is another sign to me that you got a growing middle class, you have money, people want to spend it. There's definitely opportunities in some of these, obviously big cities, but I think it just spreads out from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Other thing I've learned about Mexico that I'll share with you that I think is fascinating is this whole Acapulco to Veracruz thing. Way long time ago, before the Panama Canal, before the Nicaragua thing, before the U.S. did the Golden Spike, the way you came across the world was to stop at Veracruz, go on by whatever, horseback or whatever to Acapulco. And they're now taking that to the next level too, where they're going to transition logistically so the Chinese can ship pretty cleanly, cutting off the time and then just shooting it across to Veracruz. And that's the
Do
next.
they have trains there then?
Yeah, that's what they're going to. Yeah, it's going to be a rail logistics, super tanker kind of play. And this is, again, the way to think of Mexico, it was the original hub of the Spanish global empire. We forget that the Spanish were every bit as global as the British and done it beforehand.
Yeah.
And so the natural advantages they had of being the first mover are coming back. That's fascinating.
No, it's interesting to see. Okay, so another way you can also play Mexico is by buying the ETF. I think this is like the easiest way, obviously. That ticker is EWW. You're going to get America Mobile. That's the biggest holding. It's over 11%. FEMSA is 9%. There's a couple other interesting companies in there. That big
Grupo Televisa TV, ticker TV. Yeah.
They're 7%, and they own a portion of Univision, and they're just huge in all the television stations down there.
Right. Eva Longoria married the CEO.
She did?
Yeah,
That's who she married?
Yeah,
I heard something about her getting married down there, and I didn't
Victoria
realize that
Beckham
was who.
went down, and he
Wow.
was the head of Ticker TV.
Good catch for her.
Ticker TV, baby.
Yeah.
Ticker TV, Televisa.
Okay.
Yeah. We should talk about EWW a little bit, about this whole pricing compression thing. If you look at the charts of anything, Mobile, Ticker TV, FEMSA, any of these, they all sell off in 2013, and they all end up plummeting, sometimes in big drastic elements, and then they hold up for 6 months here at the end. So what you and I really should finish up here with is this whole idea is now the time, after all the shorting of
to get in here.
What do you think, Tracy?
Well, I do like this play right here. And I know
but right now.
Well, yeah, I do like it, because some of the problems I think they're having is with oil, because they are still big in crude. And people are a little bit spooked about that. And so they've just been selling off all emerging markets, all of them. And they lump Mexico in with it. But yeah, I think it's a buying opportunity here. I like EWW at these levels for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with her on this. I think, it's going to be tough for the time. I think anybody who's in here for 6 to 12 months is wrong, because we're not going to pick the bottom.
Longer term.
But
yeah.
If you're into Mexico for 2 years, you have a play here.
Okay.
That's what I think.
You get a dividend, I think, with EWW too.
1.8%, yeah.
Is it 1.8? Oh, that's not so bad.
Yeah. EWZ is better in Brazil. I think it's like 3.5.
Wow.
Because they've got some chemical and petrochemical firms in there. But there's no doubt that the real story here is, has this been sold so hard for so long? And are we seeing all the bad news priced in? Because now, like you're saying, with oil bouncing, and is it time for the market to realize that 3 to 4 years have passed and all these microeconomic reforms are taking root? And so you have the perfect storm of actual growth, actual income and demand growth, and valuations that are attractive. All we need here is the technical momentum turn and the buying. And once we see that, this thing can go.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Okay, let's shift to Colombia. They're kind of overlooked even more so than Mexico, because it's hard to invest over there. There's very few companies that trade on U.S. exchanges. One of them is Bank Colombia. CIB is that ticker. They pay the big dividend. They're the big bank down there. But I do know some of the analysts have had, some worries about their exposure to the crude market and the companies that are down there, and that there might be some bad loans. So that's one thing you should keep in mind if you're looking at this one. Otherwise, we do have, earnings growth this year, little over 3%, and another 14% expected for next year. It is number 2 for right now in early July. And I've always watched this bank because I do kind of like the financials in some of these emerging market countries, but you have to do your homework on this one, I feel.
Yeah, and the big thing here is they have claimed to have a deal with what's called FARC, which is their communist insurgency that has held the country back for decades. And that is the underlying catalyst here is, all these names, the Colombian Bank you pointed out, EWW, America, you look at any of the charts, they look the same.
Yeah.
Which it's seen them all, contagion of the emerging art, beat them all up. But again, if you have this perfect storm of something micro, the FARC deal, something really fundamentally different about Colombia, giving you an actual path forward for the earnings of these areas, and some broad thing, just broad acceptance that emerging markets can make you money as a stock pick, then this is a stock you can make money on.
Okay, so the ETF you can buy, I kind of recommend that a little bit more here just because it gives you broader exposure. And that is the Colombia ETF. It's ticker GXG. Get a little bit of yield. I think it's about 1.4%. But you're gonna get the CIB in there. So you should watch that if that concerns you, because that's 15% of this ETF. And then you're gonna get the big oil company, Ecopetrol, which is 6%. Some issues there right now, obviously with crude, but you're also going to get energy, the banks. It's less diverse, I feel, and less consumer oriented than the Mexico ETF is. You're getting much more of the traditional, I feel, emerging market type of companies in this.
Yeah, I agree. But I think the problem here is that we've seen all emerging markets move together. And
Right.
there's this London-based consensus, short the EMs, short the currencies. I hate to say it, but a lot of the liquidity here is not even based in these countries. It's based in some kind of London-centric, did I read the newsletter kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty cynical about that particular thing. And I think that's something to be scared of. And the timing of who knows when this whole short the EMs ends, right? I don't know if there's a trigger and you're not going to get the newsletter unless you pay 50 grand a month for it. So,
Right.
right. So, but I wanted people to know that there is a sinister element to the selling right now. And I think it's related to the absurdly low interest rates that are out there, because clearly something's happened in the financial systems where it's like risk off all the time and then don't put any money into fixed income and don't trust anybody. So this is the other thing we got to watch for is does this group make this fundamental change, and when they do it, how can we tell?
Now, one way you can, I did look around Colombia to see if there were any U.S. companies kind of going in there. But as you said, they just entered into this agreement. So it's a little bit slower for U.S. companies heading in there. But they have the super huge growing middle class too. And I think they have one of the best educated populations in that region. They have a big percentage that goes to college and all of that. So they have people who have money to spend too. And I do know that in 2014, Starbucks finally went in there. They have Juan Valdez, so they've always kind of stayed out of there because they felt like they couldn't compete with Juan, which is homegrown, their own brand. But they decided to go in there, and they went first into Bogota. And from what I could tell, there's about 6 Starbucks now in Bogota. In about 2 years' time, it's taken them to open up 6 there. I haven't seen any in like Medellin or Cartagena yet, but I'm assuming the Starbucks, machine will be pushing into some of those cities. So Starbucks is a way, I guess, to get in down there and try to tap like those middle class consumers.
Yeah, I mean, the amazing thing about the Starbucks price and consensus chart on Zacks.com is that it's a 20, doesn't move any year across the year. There's no upgrades to the year, but there's always a 20% increase year on year. And you got to ask yourself how they got to do this. They got to keep pushing the envelope to get that 20%.
They have some areas that they haven't really gone into.
Yeah, and to get 20% means you got to nail down all of Colombia, put 100 stores up.
Yeah.
They got enough of
They're
numbers,
pretty,
right?
Yeah, exactly. I think there are over 100 Juan Valdez, like standalone cafes in Colombia now. So if they're trying to, use that as their barometer and compete with them, that's, pretty big growth for them in that country. But
You would think. And, Cartagena and these areas are tourism.
Right,
can
the
come
tourist
a
areas.
long ways.
Yeah. I'm sure you've seen your share of the Starbucks, like, in Cabo area, and I've seen them in Cancun. I think there's 5 now in Playa del Carmen.
Absolutely.
In a 4-mile radius. So they're not hurting down there. and I see like it's always like a mixed group of people in there. It's not all, foreign tourists in there. The locals go in there too because it has the good Wi-Fi.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, this is the other thing that the technology, the needs are starting to converge in these areas.
Yes. So that's another area of growth. Well, okay, this was good. This was a good discussion, I think, about what's going on to our south here and opportunities that investors can look for when everyone else, maybe isn't paying attention, or it's kind of a contrarian play right now. That's
I would caution everybody though that there's this broad sweeping short the EMs, and the bottom line with that thing is don't try to time this thing. It's going to end, and I'm going to hear some story about why it's going to end after it ends, because I'm not going to hear it before it.
Right, that's right. That's always how it is.
Right.
Okay, so if you want to read anything else John is talking about, a lot of his articles are on Zacks.com. Obviously, you can go over there. We also have done a couple podcasts now about other international topics. We did one on how to invest in Canada, which I thought was really fun. So you can check that out, and you can check out all the other podcasts on SoundCloud.com, and we're also on iTunes. So until next week.